Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Inspirate Business, the show that's here to inspire you, to empower you, and to enlighten you. And as you know, each week we have someone very, very special, someone who is making an impact in their specific field of expertise. Now, today we have a very, very special guest. What I would term one of South Africa's leading CEOs. A brand that you would be very aware of has become a household brand in the South African context, in the global context. And we have none other than the CEO of Vodacom, Shameel Joosub. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Inspirate Business Show. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Wa alaikum salam, Yusuf, and thank you for having me on the show.
Yes, now, as we do each week, we bring somebody who is making an impact. But, most people don't know that it's all good to see a person of your stature, operating on a global sphere. But it takes a lot. And there's a story behind, the enigma, right, of Shameel Joosub. And I think that's what we want to, and the objective of it is, to inspire somebody. I look at your story and I say, I believe you started at Vodacom at the advent of democracy. It was
Yes.
94.
Correct.
Right, so how did that happen? I mean, grew up in Lodium, right?
Yeah.
Lodium boy ends up 94. And at that time, probably one of the first, I would say, black graduates or entrants into the corporate world. I mean, it was unheard of before that a large multinational would have black entrance into that sphere. So how did that all happen?
So it actually started from very, very, very young. I always tell people I was in training from the age of 5. By 7, I had my own business.
Okay.
I used to go to Marabastad, catch the bus from Lodium, and then buy earrings at Nizam's or Zamzam Bazaar, and then go walking around selling it and going, Mama, two bob.
Yes.
And selling, and so that's what I did. I sold with my brothers. We sold kites, we sold marbles, we sold fruit, we sold samosas. At school, I would sell ice popsicles. And I always joke and say, I used to split up the playground into different areas so different people could sell my ice popsicles for me. And so, at a very early age, I worked at the distribution is king, and that you very needed to have, to basically have it. Now, we've used the same formula in Vodacom, many, many years later. So, I worked in the fresh produce market. I sold clothing. So I had multiple different jobs throughout school. And then basically when I finished school, we didn't have money to go to university full time. So I had to start my degree in articles at the same time, the same as my elder brother had done. So I followed in his footsteps.
So how many siblings are you?
We're 6.
Okay, all right. And you're one of how many boys?
3.
3 boys and
3 girls.
All right, okay.
And so basically so what I did was when I finished school, I started doing my articles. And it wasn't easy in those days, specifically when I tried to apply for articles, it was, you'd get those ads that say regrets whites only. So, it was, but I did my articles. I did 5 years. I used to do 4 jobs at the time. So I would do my normal articles. Then at 6 o'clock, I'd start the second job. And then on weekends, I'd write up people's books, and then I would import perfumes. My uncle was in exile, and he's got big perfume stores in London. And so he would send me the perfumes, and then I would sell to the pharmacies.
And now this was obviously pre-democracy.
Pre-democracy, pre-Vodacom.
Yeah, so it's like the 80s, right? In that volatile area, we were in that sanctions area as well.
Correct.
Era as well. Yeah.
100%. So I would bring things like Calvin Klein perfumes when you couldn't get it, and
Right.
and be able to sell it. So and I did pretty well with that, because I would give my check for work to my brother to help to support the house. and then I would basically have to make money on everything else. And yeah, so alhamdulillah.
Did you lose your father at a young age?
No, my mom and dad got divorced
Oh,
when I was
all right,
10 months
okay.
old. So
All right. So it was just your siblings and your mom.
yeah, and
Okay.
then my mom got married later, but
All right.
you know, we kind of struggled and clubbed together and worked together. Now the first lesson, Yusuf, that I learned from my mom, which is, she always said there's nobody died from hard work. So that is the mantra that she created, and that you should do everything honestly, right? And lead an honest life. And so that
She just turned
she just turned 81.
81.
Yeah. So it's she was the inspiration, and she led by example. So she cooked food for people. She sold samosas. She baked, made pur and so on. And so we sold everything. She sold pressless and AMC pots and all kinds of things, And so even when I started working, I would have my. She won an AMC bag, so my bag became the AMC bag. So. Yeah, and it was tough. And even when I was doing articles, sometimes I had to. I was working in Randburg at a point in time, and effectively there was no transport, so you had to hike. And sometimes I used to walk 16 k's just to get to work because the taxi or the lift or the hiking didn't get you there. So yeah, it was a good grounding. And when I finished articles, I was now looking for a new company to join, and there was this new company, Vodacom, starting up. And one of my clients said to me, he said, "Why don't you go and apply?" So I said, "What's this Vodacom?" So anyway, he explained it hadn't launched yet.
At that time, cellular industry was still in conceptual form.
Correct.
Right?
And you were
94, 95, I remember that was like, it was unheard of.
Correct.
And when you had a phone, and you just think about the world today. But today it's like a norm, everybody has it. But at that time, it was an absolute luxury.
100%.
I remember I used to travel on a bus, come in from somewhere, and when that phone rang, because I got it at Transnet, because that was my first job, and the whole bus turned around because what is this?
Yeah, that was exactly that.
Yeah.
And so I joined Vodacom on the 1st of March, 94. As an accountant, actually, senior accountant, general ledger, budget control division, long title, and basically grew very quickly in the company. And by 26, I was managing director of a company which I founded in the group called Vodacom Equipment, where we imported devices, and at the time telcos wouldn't buy devices; they'd use third parties. So I basically started this whole concept, and it became a big company.
So this was, you started in 94, and after how many years you get to?
3 years.
In 3 years, wow.
Yeah. So 3 years, by 1998, I became managing director of Vodacom Equipment.
And this is the actual handhelds.
Yeah. The actual phones.
All right.
And then this whole concept.
And at that time, again, let's just get people to understand the context, because again, we forget. This is like almost 30 years ago. But I remember at that time it was those Nokia bricks. Correct. And I think it was the Motorola's was the big one.
Motorola's.
And there was I think there was an Ericsson as well.
That's right.
I remember these were the three key brands.
The Ericsson.
Yeah. And if you had one of those,
correct,
you were the guy.
The Nokia, the Ericsson, the Motorola. It started off with the Motorola, actually.
Yeah.
So it was, but this whole concept, and then buying it and storing it and selling, all the retailers and everybody to buy from us became a big strategic advantage, and gave us, a huge competitive advantage over our competition. And then, took the concept and flew up to Vodafone and told them they should do it everywhere in the world. And it became adopted. And so we started something called global purchasing.
So this was initiated in South Africa by yourself, and
yes,
then became an international standard.
That's right.
But I also understand that because South Africa came from a zero base when it came to this, we did have an advantage, because the rest of the world had to transform from major terrestrial to this, and we were able to catapult the rest of the world initially.
That's right.
in the
That's
cellular
right.
industry.
So we went straight to what we call GSM technology
Right.
in 1994. Whereas there was a small car phone network, but it wasn't really big. And then, it kind of catapulted. So we were one of the first countries, and a lot of first came from Vodacom and from South Africa. So example would be prepaid. We invented prepaid for the world. And I was part of that team in 1996 and flying around and, basically trying to get people to buy or to sell them on this concept of prepaid. And they all said it was going to fail. And basically that then became a huge success and everybody adopted prepaid in the world as well.
Okay, we just started and we're getting warm. We've already come to the end of this first segment, but very interestingly, and I think these are key lessons. It's today become quite a trendy word amongst the youngsters, this hustling mentality, this hustling vibe. At that time, you just did it out of necessity, but you hustled. You hustled in the streets to do 4 jobs, sold so many things, just to keep the fires burning. You also talk about strong rearing from your mom that taught you principles. It's all good to be a hustler. It's all good to talk of this instant gratification that we talk about today, but it's that old school principles of hard work. It's about honesty. A lot of these traits are getting lost. And without those, you can't be where you are today. Let's continue after the break this intriguing journey of the CEO of Vodacom, Mr. Shameel Joosub, immediately after the break. Welcome back to INSPIRATE Business, where on our red hot couch, sponsored by Asia Collective in Cromwell, we have none other than the CEO of the Vodacom Group, Mr. Shameel Joosub. And we've been having a fascinating conversation. Shameel was sharing with us his days growing up in the streets of Lodium, hustling. Hustling is what a term that is being used today. And really needing to survive, and how important that was in terms of his rearing, that he's taken those principles, those good old principles of honesty, of hard work, of just being smart into the corporate world. And now you've had a meteoric rise. For those that are watching that may have joined the corporate world, you start in 94, you say 3 years later, you become a CEO of a division, which becomes an innovator. That principle then becomes escalated to the rest of the Vodacom group, or Vodafone group. And you also were involved in the team that then initiated at the time, prepaid, which was unheard of the rest of the world. Which again tells us as South Africans, and I think we can also beat ourselves up too much as South Africans, that we quite an innovative country, right? And here you are coming out of Lodium, getting there 3 years into this, and you're already sharing these concepts with the rest of the world. So just for those that are watching, right? What does it take, to traverse this corporate animal, right? Which it is. And at the time, the leading innovative company, which still is today. And what does it take? Because a lot of people would say, no, you're there, and then you can be blocked going up the corporate ladder. What are those key elements that are required to be successful?
I think firstly, Yusuf, and the important part is the hustling mentality that you speak about. Till today, I'm still a hustler. I'm still a hustler and a battler in my own mind. So it's never, so I'm not one, and if you work for me, I'll say, well done team, right, what's next? And always looking ahead. So I think very important to always also be looking at what's required. Where's the next set of revenue? Looking 3 years hence, 5 years hence. Where is it actually, is those new revenue streams going to become from, and to start investing today? But coming back to your question, I think the important part is that firstly, you got to go in with the mentality of wanting to do more, to do better. So I think there's no substitute for hard work. You've got to put in the work. I always say, if you asked to do A, B, and C, do A, B, and C, and do X, Y, and Z. But also come in and bring thoughts. You know, you have to push and say, can we do this better? And you got to take on responsibility. You got to take on more. And if you don't, and you're going to ask for more work. So you're going to be pushing all the time for that. And I think if you do that, and you approach it, and you don't get involved in politics, and you basically show the commitment to the company, and you're putting in that work, and you're putting in that level of innovation, and you're constantly thinking out of the box. It's very hard to then keep you down. Because you've got to be a really bad manager if you can't recognize that the person is talented.
That's again some very powerful principles, old school principles that are time immemorial.
Correct.
Right? Saying that, listen, you got to go the extra mile. I think that's so powerful. I mean, a lot of people, we only put in what we're supposed to put in everything, and then life gives you what you put in.
Correct.
Right? Even if you started a business, when you put in that extra time, you getting involved, that's where you see the success. So
and also maybe we just add also ownership. So if a customer complaint comes in, you can say it's somebody else's problem, or you can own the problem and try and solve it. And teamwork is extremely important as well. Working with your counterparts, building relationships, and really making sure that you can. So just using a problem as an example, it could be an innovation, but working together to improve the company, the division, the section that you're in, I think is really critical.
So you were fortunate. You started in 94. You get in 97. You say you become
98.
98, the CEO of this equipment supplier. Selling those handhelds that we talk about, giving our ages away here. I mean, youngsters watching will be like, these are archaic concepts. These were those, I remember that even that ringtone, the famous ringtone, right? I think it was a Nokia ringtone or something. And then so leadership now becomes part of your mantra, right? Because it becomes part of you leading this division within the broader group. And then having to share this concept with the rest of the world. I guess you then at a young age now, at age of 26, now traveling also around the world. At that time, you weren't obviously as a large footprint as you have today in Africa and so on, but you were linking more with your European mother company, Vodacom, right? So you get that exposure, which I guess opens your mind as well, now traveling and dealing with leaders in other parts of the world, primarily Europe, I assume. And then what happens? I mean, you end up, I know, also heading up a Vodafone Spain, but that comes much later. So, that journey from being the head of the equipment supplier to that, what happens in that period?
So it kind of rapidly develops. So in 1999, 2000, Vodacom starts to buy back the service providers. So if you remember in those days, there was Vodac and Teljoy and GSM and Cell Phones Direct. And the Vodacom buys all of that,
right,
and effectively merges it into what is called the Vodacom Service Provider Company. So there's it's basically being run as Vodacom Network, which is the technology side, and the entire consumer side is being run. And I get basically called to go and run it. And the CEO at the time was Alan Craig, and he says, "Look, you got 6 months to turn it around." Basically,
this is on the service provider side,
correct?
Which is the face to the consumer.
Which is the face to the consumer, and at the time we had 2.5 million customers, and so it was a big turnaround. And wanted to take a lot of hard decisions.
Just as a matter of interest for those watching, 2.5 million at the time, which was what now, 19?
This was 2000.
2000. Today?
We got 45 million customers in South Africa.
Wow.
And 185 million customers in Africa.
Wow. Look at that. That's in less than 30 years, right?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So you say you've now been given this task, momentous task.
Difficult one because it's running at a loss, and now we have to fix it. And the first thing was, changes in personnel and putting in the right people for the right areas and creating the right team. And then turning it around and then building the distribution in terms of what we have today with the retailers and so on, and building relationships. Today, to give an example, at the time, Pep didn't really want to sell cell phones. And I had to use my relationships to say, look, just give it a try. Do it for me as a favor. And today, Pep does 10 million devices a year. So it's the biggest, outside of the telcos, one of the biggest, or the biggest outlet for cell phones. And it all started as a favor, but building those relationships, having those, and being able to craft the innovations that we created was very, very important. And then in 2004, we merged the two entities, and I became the MD CEO of Vodacom South Africa. By then, I'd grown the base from 2.5 million to 12.5 million, and the very next year, I doubled the base, or we doubled the base as a team, and it just was removing all the barriers that that we had, because sometimes you can have barriers in corporate. And it was quite, and then it just continued to grow,
I just want to get into your mind now. Here is now, you say at 26, 4 years later. I'm just trying to get my math also right here. Now you about 30 years, you're 29, 30, right? Yeah. You're now given this momentous task by one of the, I would term, the fathers of this industry, Alan Craig, right? And he gives you this momentous task, you at the young, tender age of 29, in an industry that's an innovative industry, right? And he's saying, you turn this around. Now, just the psychology behind it. How did you deal with it at the time? Did you just take it as somebody that's just, I'm going to do it? Did you have the strategy around it? Did you have the know-how? Just before we go to the break, just share with us a little bit of that psychology behind it.
Well, I think that the biggest thing was also trusting your decisions, yes. But having a clear plan. Okay, this is the map that we need to, or this is where we want to go. This is the North Star, what we want to achieve. And then how are we going to get there? So having the plan and then having the right people to make sure that we could execute on the plan, but also quick and difficult decisions sometimes, of giving direction, I think was really, really important. Or also creating a world where people felt empowered to make the decisions. And because it was 4 different companies, plus Vodacom equipment, plus VodaWorld, and Vodacare, and all of these things that came into this merger, it was 6 different types of cultures, 6 different types of, so you had to kind of bring everybody together. And at the time, we had to create this one program that we are one. And that actually worked very, very well. But it then created the momentum for Vodacom to expand. But also brought in some of that old school lessons, right? The playground, and used the same thing in our distribution part, and created this whole distribution networks and yeah, it just,
you had your runners in the various segments
in
of
the same concept, yeah. Just in a bigger world.
Yeah, you can never get away from your rearing and the background, right? That's what, and these are powerful principles, because Allah also espouses these to you, unique to you, which you then take into an environment like that, and that helps you. So wow, we've already come to the end of this segment, where we've been enlightened, fascinated actually by this conversation, getting into the mind of a very powerful CEO. And we'll talk about, I believe you just won an award recently, actually very, very recently. I see it was in the media now, in the telecom space. Let's talk about that and the journey beyond for the CEO of the Vodacom Group, Shameel Joosub. Catch you immediately after the break. Welcome back to INSPIRATE Business, the show that's here to inspire you, to empower you, and to enlighten you. And boy, have we been enlightened over this last 2 segments by none other than the CEO of the Vodacom Group, Shameel Joosub. And Shameel has been sharing with us his journey, being primarily left school, hustled in your school days in Lodium, which is, look, a good rearing for entrepreneurship and for those hard work, going the extra mile principles that you brought in and out of your own admission, brought into the corporate environment and has allowed you to really catapult yourself in that environment. And for those that are watching, that is a great lesson. Simple old school principles, honesty, hard work, being innovative, being smart. You can't just do it just by hard work as well. You got to think outside the box, but then also going the extra mile. I mean, you say where you, especially in an environment, in a corporate environment, maybe different to maybe running your own business where you are forced to go the extra mile. In a corporate environment, you have a job description and you can just stick into that box. But for you to be able to have an edge, the lesson I got from what you're saying is don't just do what your job requires you to do, but go the extra mile. And when you do that is when you actually then traverse beyond all the politics. You can't keep a good person down, right? That is adding value in the environment. That's what I picked up of what you were saying.
Correct.
And beautiful, beautiful principles for those watching, especially in the world where it's all taught, and I mean, even in the personal development space, it's all talk about this instant gratification and just think it and it will happen. You can't get away from these principles of going the extra mile, honesty, hard work. So you then you've been given this task to turn around an environment where you on the coal face dealing with the consumer. You turn in a space of 4 years, at the time 2.5 million subscribers, to take it up to 12 million. You then become the CEO of Vodacom South Africa. I think it was 2004 you mentioned. You then, in that 1 year, double up. So you jump to now 26 million.
Almost, yeah.
Wow, that must be, I mean, I guess that was making waves, not only in Vodacom, but across the industry. Now, again, what was the key drivers to get you to, I mean, double up, in 1 year?
Well, I think it was based on the principles of creating innovative products. So we had to always create innovative solutions and so on. And it was around about the time also we started implementing, data networks.
Okay.
So this was at the time of 3G and 3G devices and so on. So it was a multitude of sourcing the right equipment, getting very good prices, building out the network. Investment, I think investment is always key in a business like ours, and putting the right investment, making the right strategic investments always prove to be very good for us. Creating the right, understanding the consumer and understanding what the consumer wants. But maybe just a couple of principles as well. Again, for leaders, understanding where your next set of revenue is going to come from is extremely important. Also understanding customer needs and how customer needs are evolving, and what do you need to do to create that almost that gap for yourself or for your company, and how do you achieve that? And then also, where's your new sources of revenue? So, in that context, it was voice going into data, but also what pillars, what are those new innovations that you're putting in, and those new investments that will bear fruit at a later stage. And then also people development, investing into your people, and I think training and upskilling. So I say we have to raise the bar each year on our people. So getting them to do courses, having special development programs, but enhancing your people, I think, is extremely important, because as the leader, it's never about you. It's always a collective of you get to be at the helm. That's true, but it's your team and the team around you and everybody working together, and a lot of things working together well, that actually creates the results that you're looking for.
But you make a very good point now about understanding your consumer. And I'm just thinking, I understand if you're a small business owner, you very much on the coal face with your consumer. Now, here you are, a CEO of a pretty kind of structured environment where you can get lost in the bureaucracy of it and lose touch of that consumer. How did you actually get a finger, or was that mainly through your agents and, like you said, the distribution channel that gives you that feedback, or did you personally have or make a concerted effort to have your ear on and your pulse, your finger on the pulse when it comes to the consumer trends and the change in the environment? I remember at the time, I think that 2004 was where they also came up with the concept of WASPs. I think it was that where that was with the advent of data coming up, right? So what made you keep your finger on that pulse to say that this is now moving toward data, and then that gives you that next revenue spurt?
Well, I think a few things. I think travel,
Right.
and being able to engage and see what the trends are and so on. And if there's a new trend developing, to get ahead of that trend, like the WASPs. The WASPs came from us taking a trip to Japan and actually seeing what they were doing, and then coming back and effectively implementing it. And then as the innovators, as the leaders, you then do it, and of course your competition follows and copies you, and so on and so on, and then becomes embedded into it, and then you've got to kind of look at the next innovation, and so that's important. But customer focus groups, walking the floor, seeing what's going on in distribution, and some of the basics has to be there. I say like the way I explained to people when we built our whole distribution network, because we built a very sophisticated logistics network and stuff. I said, it's built on the old Indian principle of one to show and one to go. So you have to, it was, and the concept that, so I used that as to try and explain it, but it was really that you must always have stock. And if you must always be able to, because the customer wants to buy at that point in time. And if you don't have stock, the customer walks out and goes into somebody else's store.
If you're not on the shelf, they're not going to buy. That's
the whole principle.
Yeah.
Goes back to my days in the fresh produce market or selling clothing and so on. So, and the very, many different people that you learn from. And so I think that those principles became very, very important. And then, of course, service and understanding what the customer issues are and dealing with it as well. So from there, it rapidly rises, and the growth continues. And then we get to, in 2010, I get approached to say, look, we have a problem. First, they said, look, would you go to India? And I agreed, actually, that I would go to India the next year and take over the operations there. And then I got a frantic call that says, listen, we really need help in Spain. Can you rather go to Spain? So anyway, decided to take up the opportunity. I've been turning it down, as South Africans and specifically as Indians, you kind of, it's, home is still home. But,
thinking of leaving your mum and
correct.
All of that,
So anyway, took the opportunity, went to Spain.
So this was just after
this
the
is beginning
2010
of
World Cup.
2011.
2011, you go to Spain.
Yeah,
all right.
And, the business was
based
not
in Madrid or?
Based in Madrid.
Madrid, okay.
And so the business wasn't in good shape, and it was, the turnaround that I'd done in 2000, it was like having to do all of that again. But very quickly got it onto the right trajectory and so on.
We talk about the 10,000 hours
Correct.
On the show. So nice that you've
I've done a lot more than the 10,000 hours.
So you did that, and so it was easy. Then obviously you have to understand that environment, but you had the experience, right, to be able to do it. Yeah.
And also being able to, and I think the experience does play a role, because then you'll end up, of course, growing in that industry. So you can almost smell where the issues are and look at something and say, look, there's the problem. Let's throw it in here. Let's go and fix it. But it was a fix in a different culture, and so we started to get back on the right trajectory. And then in 2012, actually there was changes at Vodacom Group, and I was called back to come back and take over as Group CEO. So I had to cut my trip short in Spain, or my stay in Spain. And the family was just like starting to settle and so on.
Oh, so your family moved over. How many kids do you have?
Three.
3 kids, okay. Boys, girls.
Two boys,
And
one
they
girl.
at school or?
No, my son's actually at KPMG, was at Investec.
Okay.
And so he's done investment banking. He's just written his final CFA paper. My daughter's becoming a vet.
Okay,
She's final
nice.
year. And the young one is now third year at the varsity doing informatics.
Oh, lovely. So that must have been a great experience for the family. Going out, I mean, that also opens your mind. You're living in a foreign country, the lessons. But just as we go to the break, I just want to, you were saying something that was very important. And something when you were saying about investment, I was like thinking, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, ESCOM. I wish they could have heard that. Because one of the big issues that, you get caught up in terms of maybe you have the right intent, but you don't make those decisions. I mean, that was a typical example of a leader at the time in the world. And then today, we know the story. Because of not implementing on decisions. You could have gone to Japan, seen that idea, and then it could have just gotten lost in the bureaucracy. Just for those that are watching, just before we go to the break, that ability to turn decisions or a concept that you pick up or an idea, whether you picked it up somewhere or it's inspired, and to translate that into execution, how important that is.
It's extremely important, and to be honest with you, it's been very much my modus operandi. You see something that's working, or something that new trend. So to give an example, say big data. And big data, as I say, is the new oil. So what we've done is now, what I would then do is go and hire an expert, build a team around them, give the investment, ring fence it from the normal business. And now, today, we know like 10,000 things about you. I mean, do you know 10,000 things about yourself? Or the same thing with artificial intelligence. And it's now become so ingrained in our business. And this concept of nanonization. So there's, making things small so you can sell more. But it's really about creating dedicated teams, putting the investment into that path, and then being able to see it through. We've done the same with financial services,
which is the next trend, right? Okay, we've come to the end of this segment. Wow, I hope you are enjoying it as much as I am, and even our cameraman and production team. I see them all intrigued by this, because it's just whatever sphere of influence you're in. It's not about the lessons of just necessarily being in telecom industry, but these are principles. Running a business. You're going through a challenge. Just listen to what Shameel is saying. You got that idea, but it's about implementing, working with the right team. It's the collective, empowering, being innovative, empowering your staff, hard work, going the extra mile. These are powerful principles that are keys to success in whatever you do. As we get to the last segment, we're already in that last segment after the break, let's discuss where to. For Shameel personally and his organization as we traverse some of the challenges. And we are in a country which has got a lot of challenges. But let's tap into this intriguing mind in terms of how to traverse these challenges immediately after the break. Welcome back to INSPIRATE Business, where I hope you've enjoyed this show as much as I have. We have had the privilege of Shameel Joosub, the CEO of the Vodacom Group. Shameel has shared his journey with us and a meteoric rise, having started in a very exciting sector. I mean, for those of you that have seen this in the early 90s, well, about 94 or so, when South Africa got into this whole telecom space. And, today Vodacom is a global brand. On the continent, how many countries on the continent?
8 countries and 185 million customers and 73 million financial service customers.
When he was given a task by what I would term the father of telecoms in South Africa, Alan Knott Craig, who we pray for as well, he's suffered a stroke and I believe not doing too well. He was given a task to turn, at the time, 2.5 million. subscribers in South Africa. Today in South Africa you have
45 million.
Wow, isn't that success? And he's been sharing with us the principles of that hard work, innovation, working together, empowerment of your team. You can't do this on your own. And, just these powerful principles. But as we finish, come to the end of the show, for you personally, Shameel, and for the Vodacom Group, I know Vodacom is a key contributor to this economy. We in a country, let's admit, we have a lot of challenges. We can't continue in a country with such advent of poverty. Just a few that enrich. This is a precipice we're facing. What some, our ex-president Thabo Mbeki says, we could be facing an Arab Spring in South Africa if we don't deal with this. What can we do differently? Being a leader in this country and on the continent as well. I mean, the same issues are on the continent. And even you look at it even in the global space, it's becoming a challenge. What can we do differently? The Islamic principles that we are taught, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us these principles of giving, of what they call servant leadership, which I think a lot of our problems in the world is a lot around taking, and it's about enriching, and it's just about me culture. From your perspective, how do you see us traversing this challenging landscape that we operate in?
Yeah, I think, for us as a corporate, and then I think the big part is that social contract. And I think not just the social contract, but I think it's also an important concept that needs to resonate personally. And that's the part of giving back. And that it's incumbent on all of us. And I think, there's nothing more beautiful than the Islamic principle of having to give back. So how do we then make that impact? And so that's what we're doing as a corporate, is how can we help to make an impact? So an example, in South Africa, we have 92 teacher training centers where we teach the teachers, we teach our kids. And that's extremely important for us.
There's a trainer type of program.
Correct. What that we do in cooperation with government. We have 10 youth centers where we physically take kids off the street, train them, and basically, and they come out as Cisco, Google certified, and so on and so on. And then, of course, we recruit from there, governments recruits from there, and so on. And we have 3,100 schools where we provide connectivity. I think, the leading organization in gender-based violence. So, there's different concepts. We have a big program called M-Mama, which has now become quite a big global initiative that is now going beyond our. So it's something we launched in Tanzania we built a hospital to eradicate fistula. Then we decided that, look, we need to deal with getting pregnant women to hospital on time from remote areas. So we came up with an ambulance service called M-Mama. So effectively, you just call a number or SMS a number, and we send out a hospital, an ambulance or a taxi ambulance to come and pick you up and get you there on time. And now the president's behind it, and we're now expanding it, and it's going to the neighboring countries, and it's just kind of ballooning. But like that, we try and make an impact in education, because education for me is the most important thing that you can give to your kids. And that becomes a level of inequality. So that's one of the parts that we're trying very hard to have an impact on, is on education through virtual classrooms. We have a lot of different initiatives in that way. And then, of course, even in your personal capacity. So we have, my personal capacity, the family home that we built in Lodi, we converted into a home of safety orphanage called New Beginnings. And alhamdulillah, it's been, I think we've had over 1,000 kids that have gone through in the last, like 12 years. And so I think that, and then we have also programs where, with my brother, we have a group called a Group of Helpers. Also work very closely with with Gift of the Givers, both as a contributor, but also with Vodacom. So when we have a crisis in the country, as you know, Gift of Givers is always first. So we partner on these different initiatives as well. So I think it's incumbent on us as business people to give back, to find out how we can contribute. And if you can't contribute in the form of money or service and so on, you can also contribute as part of your time.
Your time, yes.
So for me, that's extremely important in terms of how one gives back. And I think if we all do that as the corporate South Africa and across the continent, that can also help make a meaningful difference. Of course, some of the big challenges like power, we're jumping in head first to try and assist. And so we're helping both on the security side with digitization of processes, and on the other side with by signing and piloting some innovative parts where we can contribute power to the grid. So and then other corporates will be able to follow. So we're busy with Eskom with a program where we can actually sign up the IPPs and contribute the power to the grid. So these type of things, and I think you have to sacrifice your time to make sure that you taking part in some of these initiatives.
See, that's actually very, very powerful what Shameel is sharing with us, because I think a lot of us have become very disillusioned, and then it's easy to blame. Yes, we understand the challenges and the political challenges. There has been, Zondo has shared all the corruption that has taken place and whatever, but as patriots in our country, we have to be doing things differently. And this is where it needs, as you say, multi-stakeholder involvement. You're just talking on energy where you have government involved, you have here big corporate, you have some of the initiatives where you have the NGOs involved, like the Gift of the Givers, and you just get in patriotic South Africans involved as well. And this is where we can tackle so many of the issues. I think somebody said something very interesting. They said, whatever the problem that you see, that is your vocation. To solve that problem is what you can be doing in terms of your vocation. So whatever it is, you see the potholes, go and fix up the potholes, and maybe there's an opportunity there in some business side of things to be able to do it. And there's so many of these. But I like what you're saying and I think our wealth as a country, it's our challenge, but it's also our wealth, is this latent talent amongst our people. And with the education that you're doing and the fact that you're in that digitization space, which we can catapult so much in terms of time to spearhead our country into becoming a competitive force, which I think South Africa has to play even on the continent. We've come to the end of the show. Some parting words, for our viewers. It has been a challenging period. We're just wiping our eyes out of the COVID pandemic. A lot of people have lost their businesses. Some have lost their loved ones. People are picking up the pieces. It's just some parting words. You shared some of the prophetic principles of giving, and just some of that for our viewers, from yourself before we close the show.
Yeah. So, one of the things I think, no matter what the adversity that you're faced with, I think we have a very strong faith. So you need to use that. So example would be, if I'm going on to a show, I'm going on to stage, and people say like, how do you speak? Or how do you. So before, as I was sitting here, I was doing a little zikr before we started talking. As I was also making the intention, say, Allah, please put for me the right words for this audience. So I think that those principles you should, and is very important. I think the second part is humility. Walk with your feet on the ground. And that's extremely important principle as well. I think the principle of hard work is there. I think the principle of also looking for the principle of giving back, very, very important. But also the principle of looking at, in adversity, there's opportunity. And so you can couple the things. So give an example in COVID, what we did. We made sure that we stepped up as a corporate, helped government. The entire program of the whole vaccination in South Africa was run by us. That whole platform was ours. We gave all the health workers phones. We did, we contributed in cash. We did a whole lot of things. We helped build the cold storage part and so on and so on. So that was that was one part of it. But at the same time, we stepped up and we said, what can we do? There's a customer need. And so instead of corporates close their investment, we invested through COVID. And actually, we did very, very well out of COVID because people were at home, we made sure they had connectivity, and so on. So there's different things that you can do. And I think sometimes when you go out with the purpose of doing the right thing, it comes back in another way. So an example would be, we zero-rated person-to-person money transfers across our countries because you didn't want to deal with physical cash. We didn't have any intention. But alhamdulillah, the benefit that came afterwards, because we ended up gaining much more users because we made it free. So after that, when we started to return back to charging post-COVID, we'd actually had gain.
Wow.
That wasn't the intention, but you can see that when you do the right thing, it does come back in other ways to benefit you. And then honesty. I think you have to be honest in your dealings. And really make sure that you do it. And then lastly, investment into your people and investment into the future.
Wow, isn't that such powerful, again, I use the word old school principles, taught by his mum. May Allah give her good and long life. I did see some pictures of her recent birthday that were shared by your brother. Alhamdulillah, she looks very healthy. But these are principles that was taught to us by our elders and taken into this corporate world. And I hope you watching can just take some of these and let's implement it in our own lives and improve whatever area you're involved in and make that impact. That of just having that pure intention, giving without any expectation, and look at that, you get so much more. These are the prophetic principles. This is what Allah has given us injunction in the Quran as well. On that very, very powerful note, we, on behalf of the INSPIRATE Business Show, thank you so much, Shameel, for sharing your time. A very busy schedule, and I know you travel around the world, so it's been difficult to get you here, but thank you so much. And I can see all the smiles from the team. We've learned a lot in this last hour, and hope to do many things together with the Hilaal team as we also try to make an impact in our own domain. On that note, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.